Hello, friends of Tangled Hearts. Welcome to our channel, where stories of love and passion unfold. Let's begin our exciting journey into the world of human relationships. Today's narrative revolves around the main character, who uncovers a shocking truth about his marital life. He was profoundly stunned to see his wife in an intimate moment with another man. She had left the main character's family behind and eloped with her paramour. Now, let's delve into the story. Jim and I had just finished our day shift at the plant, and we were driving back home together in my car. We always commuted together whenever our work shifts coincided, and this week it was my turn to use my car. As soon as we left the plant, Jim asked me to stop at a pharmacy on our way back home so that he could have a prescription filled. His wife, Sally, had a bad cold, and the doctor had prescribed medication to help her get rid of her stubborn cold. Since we were passing by the pharmacy where my wife, Rachel, was working, I decided to surprise both Jim and my wife by stopping there. Throughout all those years she had been working there, I had never once visited her at her place of work. I figured she would be very surprised to see me there today. I had never dared to visit her at the pharmacy because I didn't want her coworkers or her boss to think I was checking on her. Surprisingly, she had never commented on this fact to me. She was working that day, and I knew she would be indeed surprised to see me. She only worked there 2 days a week, and I thought it was about time I met her boss after 6 years of marriage. Rachel and I had been married for 9 years, and even though we weren't rich, I was earning good money at the plant where I worked. I preferred that my wife stay at home, but 2 years after our marriage, she claimed she needed to get out of the house and wanted to enter the workforce. She also wished to have a car of her own. She convinced me to let her work for a year or two, at least until she had saved enough to buy the car she wanted. A week after we agreed, she found a job at a pharmacy on the other side of town. Just over a year later, she gave birth to Sandy. For the next 2 years, she became a stay-at-home mom. Later, when Sandy was older, she once again begged me to let her work, even if it was only a couple of days a week. She claimed she had already contacted the pharmacy where she had previously worked, and Mr. Clarkson was willing to take her back, even if it was just for 2 days a week. I finally agreed, and she arranged for her mother to take care of Sandy on those days. She had now been working 2 days a week for Mr. Clarkson for over 3 years, and Sandy was almost 6 years old. Not once had I stepped inside her place of work. I parked in front of the pharmacy, and Jim and I both went inside. It wasn't a huge place, but it had just about everything one would expect to find in a pharmacy. There were 4 long aisles, on each side of which were shelves loaded with everything from cough syrup to all brands of medicines. Then, completely at the back, was the space where prescriptions were being filled. Of course, Jim and I immediately walked there, but instead of seeing Rachel, as I expected, there was only a middle-aged man behind the long counter. He took Jim's prescription and started working on it. I was about to introduce myself and ask him where my wife was, but since Jim was standing next to me, I didn't want him to know that I was ignorant about the fact she was not there, so I didn't say anything while the pharmacist was busy filling the prescription. Jim slowly wandered further away, looking around at the different displays. That's when I decided to give a closer inspection to the back of the place. As soon as I looked over the counter behind the pharmacist, my eyes fell on a desk near the wall. On it rested a framed picture of a girl who appeared to be about 7 or 8. The thing that struck me about the picture was the fact that the child in it looked so much like my Sandy that it was uncanny. She had the same long blonde hair and blue eyes. Even her smile was the same. I just stood there, all as I examined the picture. I was shocked and amazed by the resemblance to my daughter. It was as if I was looking at how Sandy would look in a year or so. How is that possible? I asked myself. All of a sudden, I couldn't help myself, and I asked the pharmacist, who was still busy counting pills, if the child in the picture was his daughter. No, I have only 2 boys at home. This is Kathy. She is the daughter of Mr. Clarkson. She is a lovely child, isn't she? Yes, she certainly is, I replied. I was simply too shocked to say anything. So, I moved away, pretending to look for an item on the shelf on my left. But deep inside, I suddenly felt sick. I kept asking myself, how could this Kathy look so much like my own daughter, and where was my wife? Then I had a very bad feeling deep inside. I suppose that I had a hint of a clue to the answers to both questions, but I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. All of a sudden, I felt a strong need to get out of there. I walked toward Jim and told him I was going to wait for him in the car. While sitting there waiting for Jim, I began to think. Sandy looked nothing like Rachel, and she certainly had none of my facial features. Also, Rachel and I both had brown eyes and dark brown hair, while Sandy was blonde. When she was a young child, all my friends kept making jokes about the color of her hair. Some even asked me if I was ordering pizza often at my house, or what the hair color of the mailman was. Of course, these were only friendly jokes, and I didn't let these remarks bother me. But now it all came back to haunt me. Was Sandy really my daughter, or was she the daughter of Mr. Clarkson? The strange thing was that I had never once met or seen Carl Clarkson, so I didn't have a clue as to what he looked like, except for the fact that he had light-colored hair. Rachel had mentioned this to me a few times. When Rachel and I were home later that evening, she noticed my quiet and pensive mood. She even asked me if there was something bothering me. Of course, I didn't tell her that I had stopped at her place of work that day or what was on my mind. But I certainly would have liked to learn where she was when I stopped there. Still, I kept my mouth shut about my doubts. I knew I had to be careful and not accuse her of something that might exist only in my imagination. More importantly, I knew that I needed to get proof to confirm or disprove my doubts about the parentage of my daughter. You see, it was extremely painful for me to even consider the possibility that my precious angel might not be my biological daughter. I love my daughter more than anyone else in the world, and I would have walked through fire for her. I tried to convince myself that it was probably just a coincidence that the two girls looked so much alike, but deep inside, I experienced growing suspicion that kept coming to the surface. Later that night, while I was in bed lying next to my wife, the full impact of the day's events finally hit me. If Sandy wasn't my daughter, and if Carl Clarkson was her biological father, this implied that Rachel had been deceiving me from the very beginning when she first began working for him over 6 years earlier. I told myself that even today, it was more than probable she was still continuing her affair with her lover. She had probably made a fool of me during all those years, each time she returned home to me after having been with her boss. She was probably secretly enjoying the knowledge that she had just fooled me, knowing I suspected nothing of her affair. Yes, I had already noticed that she always took a shower as soon as she came home, saying to me, "I have to remove the smell of the different chemicals I am in contact with." I now knew that she was rushing into the showers as soon as she came home to remove all traces of her recent infidelity. The following day was Friday. Since Rachel wasn't working that day, I drove to her place of work after dropping Jim off at his house. I now wanted to see Carl Clarkson face to face. Since he didn't know me, and I had never seen him before, I felt that it was time I finally had a look at him. After asking the woman behind the cash register where Mr. Clarkson was, I was told that he had already gone home, but she added that Mr. Mann, his assistant, could help me with my prescription. She pointed toward the back, indicating the same man who had filled Jim's prescription the previous day. I told her that I would come back on another day since I had personal business with Mr. Clarkson. She then dropped a bombshell on me by adding that I should make sure that I didn't come on a Tuesday or a Thursday afternoon since he was never in the pharmacy at those times. Of course, I left without saying another word. I just nodded to indicate that I understood. What the hell was going on here? I asked myself as soon as I was sitting in my car. Rachel had been hired to assist Mr. Clarkson on those 2 days. She was there to count pills for him and to help him with the filling of prescriptions. At home, she always referred to him as Mr. Clarkson, and now I had just been told that on those 2 days of the week that she was working, he was taking the afternoon off. It just didn't make sense to me. What was Rachel doing on those afternoons? After all, she was supposed to be helping her boss. The previous afternoon, she was not there, but she was supposed to be working. Was she somewhere else with him? After the birth of Sandy, I had been completely against her going back to work, but she kept insisting that she wanted this until I finally conceded. Now I had a very sour feeling about her job, and that child's picture that stood on the desk kept coming back into my mind to haunt me. In my mind, the wall of doubt about my wife's faithfulness was getting stronger all the time. Was she cheating on me with her boss, or was it only my overactive mind playing tricks on me? I discovered that the weekend at home with Rachel was the worst weekend of my life. Every time I would look at her, I kept imagining her having an affair with her boss. Of course, I couldn't place a face on him since I didn't know what he looked like exactly. Deep inside, I felt that there was a good chance that Sandy was his daughter. Was he still seeing my wife behind my back? Could she even be working on her second child with him? All those years, she had been seeing him, probably more often than I had. I now couldn't think of her without feeling my anger coming to the surface. I knew that from now on, each time I would look at her, I was going to experience the same frustration until I got proof to the contrary. One sad morning, while she was still sleeping next to me, I quietly looked at her. She was a beautiful woman indeed, but the thought of what she was probably doing behind my back discouraged me. We didn't talk at all until noon that day, and when the three of us were sitting around the table, I mostly talked to my daughter. In bed that night, I woke her in the middle of the night to make love. There was no kissing and no soft words, just straightforward intimacy. It was my way to seek revenge on her for giving to another man what was rightfully mine. Only, for some reason, Rachel never complained about the way I was treating her. That fact all by itself was telling me more than anything else. She had something to hide and was trying to buy herself out of trouble by allowing me to have all the intimacy I wanted with her. After all, I had no tangible proof yet that she had been cheating. I didn't even understand myself why I was acting this way. All I knew was that I had that strong urge to cause her pain. I suppose that her lack of protest for my treatment was mostly due to fear. But why should she fear me, her husband? Unless, of course, she had something to hide. She just wanted my anger to be over with so that we could go on with our usual daily affairs at home. I could tell she was afraid of getting into a discussion with me, afraid to uncover that I knew her dark secret. She was buying peace by being submissive to me and enduring all the humiliation I was imposing on her. As the days went on, I became still more convinced that she was having an affair with her boss. I was now also convinced that her affair with her boss had been going on for years. All my life, I have always been a gentle and caring husband. I considered myself a good lover to my wife. Now, I was simply using her body to satisfy my needs without any consideration for hers. I didn't feel bad about what I was doing to her since I no longer considered her as my loving wife. I suppose it all boiled down to the fact that I was trying to get a little payback from her by being selfish and rough when making love to her. The more this went on, the more I detected apprehension and fear in her expression. One evening, as she quietly sat in front of me around the kitchen table, I watched her as she quietly ate. I could tell that she suspected that I knew something about her affair with this Carl. She was now probably afraid to bring the matter into the open and have a frank discussion with me. Why was she afraid? I didn't know, since I have never been a violent man. Could it be that she wasn't ready to break up her marriage with me? She wanted to retain the security of being married to me, as well as the excitement, or was it the love of her affair with her boss? I finally decided to gather proof of her cheating. I made up my mind that I was going to take the day off on the following Tuesday and follow her to her place of work. I was pretty certain that she and her lover weren't engaging in their affair at the pharmacy, so they had to go somewhere else to deceive me. I thus planned to ask Jim to lend me his truck on that day so that I could follow her without being observed. Tuesday morning, I dressed in my working clothes just like usual. Then I drove to pick Jim up at his house. Once there, I gave him the key to my car, and I took off in his truck. I drove back to my house, parking the truck just a few houses away from home so that I could see my house easily. Half an hour later, I saw Rachel getting into her car with Sandy, and I discreetly followed her to Sandy's school, where my daughter got off. She then drove directly to the pharmacy. I parked Jim's truck on the other side of the street and waited patiently while listening to the radio. I don't know exactly what I was expecting would happen, but I just knew that something would. From where I was, I could see her red Toyota and most of the parking spaces next to the pharmacy. I was determined to stay there all day if need be. Barely half an hour after she had entered the pharmacy, I saw a black SUV driving into the parking lot, and the driver parked in the space next to my wife's Toyota. A tall, well-dressed man of around 35 got out of the vehicle and entered the pharmacy using his key on a private door that opened next to the parking lot. The moment I saw him getting out of his car, I knew he was the father of the little girl I had seen in the framed picture. It suddenly hit me. This man was probably also the biological father of Sandy. This was my wife's lover. He was the one who had been fooling me for the last 6 years. I felt a strong urge to run after him and beat the hell out of him, then go inside and beat the hell out of my wife also. But the time for expressing my rage that way had passed and gone. I was at least 6 years too late. It would have been fine to do this after she had played him the first or second time. Even then, maybe just maybe, there could have been a chance my marriage could have survived her cheating. But not after 6 years of playing him at a possible rate of 2 times each week. Now was the time to get rid of her, as well as to make both of them pay for what they had done to me. Payback was definitely on my mind now. I waited patiently in Jim's truck until noon. All of a sudden, I saw the same door swing open, and Rachel and the man got out of the building. They both had smiles on their faces. To someone not knowing them, they looked like a happy couple. They both got into his SUV, and they drove away. The black SUV was easy to follow, since my wife's lover seemed in no hurry. 15 minutes later, they were driving on a country road that led toward the lake. Another 10 minutes, and I watched them turning into the entrance of a nice log cottage right on the shore of the lake. I parked Jim's truck on the side of the road half a mile further, then I walked back toward the log cottage. A tall, well-trimmed cedar hedge, except for the side facing the lake, surrounded it. I thus knew that I had nothing to fear from being observed by the neighbors, since the tall hedge would give me plenty of privacy. I slowly walked around the house until I heard noises coming from an open window on the left side of the cottage. After carefully approaching the half-open window, which came to the height of my shoulders, I looked inside. It took my eyes a couple of seconds to adjust to the half-darkness in the room. But after a while, I could clearly see the shapes of a woman and that of a man on a bed. They were both naked and already enjoying themselves. Looking carefully at his face, I could now detect the resemblance with Sandy, my daughter. He had the same delicate nose that she had, and of course, the same hair and eye color. There were no longer any doubts in my mind now. Carl Clarkson was the biological father of Sandy. He had conceived her with my supposedly faithful wife. All those years, she led me to believe that I was Sandy's father, and thus making a fool out of me. My wife and her lover must have been laughing at me. In their eyes, I was the biggest fool there could be, since I was unknowingly raising the of another man. For all that I knew, they were probably working on another child right now. But I loved my daughter. In my mind, she was still my daughter and would always be. No one was going to take her away from me, but it was still an enormous shock to watch my wife making love with another man. This is certainly not something that I would recommend to any husband. It made me extremely angry and sad, even if it did turn me on somewhat at the same time. I was at a loss as to what to do next. By now, I was crying and feeling sorry for myself. Of course, this further served to feed my anger toward both of them. At that moment, I regretted the fact that I hadn't brought a camera with me and thus had access to proof of her cheating. By now, I knew that I was going to file for divorce. I needed convincing arguments of her cheating in front of the judge and to try and get custody of Sandy. Seeing your wife, the woman that you love, secretly having an affair with another man is a devastating experience. I could no longer endure to watch them or listen to what they were saying, so I quietly walked back to the truck. Rachel came home at her usual time after work that day. She immediately went upstairs to take a shower while I finished preparing supper for the family, just like I usually did on those days she was working. We didn't talk much to one another, but we both paid much attention to Sandy, who was telling us all about her day at school. The following morning was a Wednesday, and Rachel wasn't working that day. She was in her gown and sitting at the table eating breakfast with Sandy and me. Once in a while, I caught her looking at me when she thought I was busy eating. She had a strange expression on her face. I suppose that she now strongly suspected that I knew something about her affair with her boss. I could even detect a hint of fear in her look. That evening, while she was putting away the dishes in the kitchen, I told her about a fictitious worker at the plant. He had surprised his wife with another man the previous week. I told her that he had beaten her to within an inch of her life when he discovered her affair. I also added that his friends at the plant were planning to give a lesson to her lover. After quietly listening to what I said, she looked at me with wide eyes. Then she asked me if I thought this was the right thing to do. I explained to her that the woman had no business cheating on her husband. It was only fair that they both, the wife and her lover, should pay for the disrespect that they had shown toward the husband's marriage. Tuesday again, I took the afternoon off, and I borrowed Jim's truck once more. After eating my lunch in the truck at noon, I drove to the cottage by the lake, and sure enough, Carl's black SUV was there parked in the driveway. This time, I had my video camera with me, and I was prepared to film the proof of their cheating. I needed that proof not only to help me get custody of Sandy, but also to show to Carl's wife. Yes, it was my intention to hurt him as much as I could. He was going to pay for the illicit excitement he got out of his affair with my wife.